Now that World War One has officially started, we can talk about kind of how they were fighting this war because it's really what we call the first modern war. We have modern technology, and it's going to be something that they don't really know exactly how to handle it. And this is why we ultimately get what we call trench warfare, which I'll get to in a second. Fighting really starts, all the major fighting starts on August 3rd, 1914, when Germany invades Belgium. And they're going to be following a strategy known as the Schlieffen Plan. And basically, what this plan calls for is a holding action against Russia and then a quick drive through Belgium to the city of Paris, which is obviously going to be a major city that they're going to want to capture. And then the two German armies would meet to defeat Russia. So after they took Paris over, they're going to meet back together because ultimately Germany is surrounded on all sides by the Allies. So that's going to make it difficult for them. So they want to quickly capture Paris and then bring both armies together to fight Russia. When the Germans get to Belgium, the Allies aren't able to save it, and Belgium falls. And so the Allies are going to retreat to the Marne River, and this is where they're going to basically dig in. They are going to halt that advance in September of 1914, and when they struggled to outflank each other, they just kind of dig in. So by the spring of 1915, you have these two systems of like deep rat-infested trenches across the country of France. And so what trench warfare was just like really nasty, horrible, just fighting for a couple of yards, maybe miles of land for just months, which then turns into ultimately years. So when they're fighting this trench warfare, you have three lines essentially. You have a front line, a support line, and a reserve. And then between each side's trench, you have what is called no man's land, which I'll bring that up here again in a second. So we get to the First Battle of the Somme. This is a battle that's fought for a total of 7 miles of ground, where you're going to have 1.2 million casualties. And this is the ultimate downfall of fighting your first modern war and not really knowing how to, because we have modern weaponry, and they're still trying to use old tactics, and the mixture is just casualties and so many deaths. So to switch over here for a second, your textbook has a really nice graphic with trench warfare. And so what you see here is kind of like their depiction. So you have airplanes. Here's no man's land in between the two sides. You can see the barbed wire in here, and it's pretty difficult to cross. And no man's land was something that was really dangerous to do, and you're going to lose a lot of people because on the other side, you have machine guns. And I mean, they just are able to mow people down as they're trying to cross no man's land. There is a really good book about World War I, and it's called All Quiet on the Western Front. So they have their original version from 1930 has this really good depiction of what it was like to cross no man's land. So it's really bad acting, so stay with me, but I really wanted to show you this clip. So you can see them waiting for the opposite side to cross with their machine guns. And what comes next is well, it's gruesome, I mean, for the 1930s. Okay. So we're not going to watch all of it, but it's definitely something that, you're running right into the line of fire and there's really no way to protect yourself. And the use of modern technology just adds to that kind of terrifying experience. So, to come back to your graphic here, what you have, you'll see fortifications. They're generally, like it says here, shielded from enemy fire by low walls. And they're built kind of like bunkers, basically. But the bad part about this is that they're all open up top, and you can see that. And what's going to be added to World War I that makes the war just even more gruesome is the fact that we're going to introduce gas. And so there's just about 3 different kinds. You have chlorine, phosgene, and mustard gas. And it could just be like an irritant, but it could also cause death, and it could basically cause you to kind of drown and your lungs basically liquefy, and it's a horrible, horrible way to go. And there's actually another scene in All Quiet on the Western Front where a guy he doesn't get his gas mask on in time, and he inhales, it was either mustard gas or chlorine gas, whatever, but his buddies just had to basically shoot him because there was nothing that they could do for him. He was either going to die a slow death or they could just like put him out of his misery, and that's ultimately what they chose to do. So you can check this out in your textbook if you want to look through this, especially for your project. It might give you some ideas on your history section on trench warfare. Okay. So just to hit on a couple of other things, when you talk about trench warfare, make sure you're hitting on the no man's land and what that was and how dangerous it was. Some of the things that are going to be an ultimate downfall, well, it's all a downfall in World War I with the trenches and everything, but really, it's just a constant barrage of artillery, and it causes a lot of mental problems for the people that are fighting this war. And they call it shell shock. It is a complete emotional collapse, and a lot of people aren't going to recover. Today, we call that PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. And I mean, their nervous systems it's just completely shattered by the noisy shelling. And when we do our little trench warfare simulation, I'll kind of like play some of that for you. And it's just constant noise, and over time, I mean, that's really going to get to you. So not only do you have to probably deal with shell shock or some level of it, they're also affected by disease. And trench fever is one of those. It's a fever and a rash. Potential death if they don't get to control it in time. Trench foot is particularly nasty, and it's caused by standing in these cold, wet trenches, and their feet are never dry, and so their toes would have like turned blue and then red, and then they would eventually go numb, and then they rot. And the only solution that they have is to either like cut off their toes or just amputate the whole foot. And so you have a lot of World War I soldiers that are going to come back with injuries that it's just awful. And then there's also trench mouth. It's just like an infection in your gums and your throat. But just what you can gather from this is that life in the trenches just sucks. So, we'll talk about some of the new weapons in class before we get started with our simulation, and we'll go from there. All right.